and there's, I think you just line up here and when you're ready to ask.
Good morning. I think we're okay on mics. I haven't seen her yet.
Oh, there she is.
Okay. She texted me last night and wanted to know if
Bobby texted me to ask where it was this morning.
Oh, okay, good. So they had texted me. She had texted just to see if they had the chamber one. Good morning. How are ya?
When I get up here.
Can we encourage you to start at that end?
Dave?
You're okay with that, right?
Dave?
Oh,
Can you take your
she's the
seat,
one.
please?
Oh, you're
Jacoby?
then she'll
He's not paying attention. Okay. Got our jobs to do. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay. Could I have your attention, please? We're going to get started here.
I didn't get my
And we're being televised, so if people could remain a little quiet, that would be helpful. Thank you. Good morning. Welcome to the first legislative forum in a series of 3 being sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Johnson County during the 2020 Iowa legislative session. Out of courtesy for all present, we ask that you silence your cell phones. My name is Eliza Willis, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Johnson County. The League is dedicated to educating voters on political and ballot issues. We encourage informed citizen participation in government. Membership is open to both men and women age 16 and older. We invite you to join us. There are brochures about the League on the table in the lobby. These forums are designed to give local citizens an opportunity to discuss current state legislative issues with their elected officials while the legislative session is underway. Today's forum focuses on issues related to education. Co-sponsors for today are the Iowa City School District, Iowa City Education Association, American Association of University Professors, and University of Iowa Public Policy Center's Social and Education Research Program. I'd like to introduce our legislators. We have 3 senators here. Joe Bolcom, representing District 43.
Morning.
Kevin Kinney, District 39. Zach Walls, District 37. We're waiting for, we've got also 5 representatives. We're waiting for one to appear, Bobby Kaufmann. I think he's on his way. District 73. Dave Jacoby, District 74. I think next is Mary Masher, District 86.
Good morning.
Vicki Lensing, District 85, and Amy Nilsson, District 77. So welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for coming. We will start the forum with 5-minute summaries from each of our legislators on recent legislative matters of interest to them individually, starting with Senator Bolcom, representing District 43.
Well, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks the league, and we always kick off the winter forums with education, and I welcome all the co-sponsors. Thanks for being here. I guess we're pushing, 3 weeks next week, our 3rd week of the session. First week's a lot of speeches. We hear from the governor, the condition of the judiciary. We hear from the National Guard and learned a number of things through those different addresses. This last week, things are getting moving. We've had subcommittee meetings, a lot of committee meetings in the Senate. The Senate State Government Committee, I think Thursday, passed the constitutional resolution to ban abortion in Iowa. It's a process that takes several years, but Senate Republicans are wasting no time getting that moving. There was a bill, I think, got some attention to arm county attorneys. County attorneys need to be packing, apparently, when they're in the courthouse. And then I was on a subcommittee on a topic of synthetic urine. Apparently, people that do drug tests can buy synthetic urine and take it to the drug test. It's a topic I'd never heard of before. And creating criminal penalties for somebody that tries to fool a drug test by using synthetic urine. So that was interesting. So there are a lot of interesting topics. Some good, some bad. One of the things I want to talk about just briefly is the governor's proposed tax proposal that would it does a number of things. I'll just outline them and give a couple comments about it. One, it raises the sales tax 1 penny. In most places, it would be 8% on your purchases. 1 cent, raising the sales tax 1 cent raises about $540 million. Part of that money would be dedicated to the I Will, or the conservation trust that people have been interested in for the last decade, roughly $190 million. About $410 million would go to an income tax cut, largely benefiting wealthy people. And the proponents of this, as the governor said, we're not going to raise taxes. This isn't going to raise anybody's taxes. It's going to be revenue neutral. So you raise $540 million here, and then you cut income taxes by $410. And there's an additional proposal to cut property taxes that currently go to fund the adult mental health system by $80 million. So statewide today, the adult mental health system gets about $115 million from taxpayers everywhere. It's been $115 million since 1997. We've not allowed them to raise an extra dollar. And the governor wants to take away 70% of that locally controlled and raised money and replace it with state appropriations, which haven't been around for a while in state government. I don't mean to be mean to the state legislators that I've served with. Or the state has really difficult time keeping its word. It's one of the reasons we have a decent adult mental health system is that we raise the money locally. It's really stable money, and it's controlled locally. And when you take that away and have the state run it, one, you can't depend on the state for the money, and two, there'll be a lot of strings attached to that money that might agree or disagree with local folks. I'm extremely concerned about really the potential unraveling of the adult mental health system if the state takes more control of it. Think Medicaid privatization, right? Do we really want the state operating the system that's largely working? Or think children's mental health system. Well, you'd say, well, we don't really have one. That's been the state's responsibility the last 50 years. The adult system's been grown by local people, boards of supervisors in 99 counties. I think we should make sure we protect that. On the I Will proposal, there's essentially, it's going to raise about $190 million. We haven't seen details on this, but we've heard that at least $90 million of that money Half the money that's going to go to the Conservation Trust is going to go to things that are already being paid for in the general fund of the state. So the expectation of the conservation community is we're going to have this enormous amount of new money to fund water quality, trails, city parks, county parks. By the way, most of the sales tax money is going to come from people that live in towns like Iowa City, in Des Moines, and Cedar Rapids. And we want to ensure, as there's talk about rewriting the formula to send all the money to the farmstead, send all the money to rural property owners, we want to make sure that because urban people largely are going to pay the lion's share of this cost, that things happen for people that live in town, that we get more bike trails, that we get more city parks, we get more county land, we get more recreation. So that's a little bit on that. I'm happy to take any questions about the tax proposal. It needs a lot of work. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Senator Kevin Kinney, District 39.
Hi, I'm Kevin Kinney. I do serve Senate District 39, which encompasses Keokuk County, most of Washington County, and western and southern Johnson County. Right now, I'm serving as the ranking member of Judiciary, ranking member of Ag. I am on the Ethics Committee along with Transportation. I also serve on the Ag and Natural Resources Budget Sub. There have been, I've already served on 12 budget subs, which are 12 subs out of our committees already, which is hitting the ground running, because all you're doing is going to meetings. A lot of these come out of the judiciary, in which I believe we had 140 bills last year, and we're going back through a lot of these same bills again. So it's been very interesting. One of the things that I've been working on this year, it's with Representative Kaufmann. He and I have been working on EMS as an essential service, trying to get ambulance and first responder services to our rural communities especially. We don't notice it here in the urban areas, but as soon as you get out of our urban areas, our EMS is really struggling, because law enforcement is to be funded by the counties through property tax levies, and fire. The ambulance service and EMS is not. So we're trying to come up with different funding sources and a structure in which we would fund EMS. Hopefully we'll have a bill in a week here that we can actually show you. We're kind of looking at 4 different bills or 5 different bills and making them one. Another issue that I've kind of worked on the last few years a little bit is statute of limitations on the civil side of the sexual assault, to be able to bring a civil claim against someone that has sexually abused you. In the criminal side, we've raised the statute of limitations for someone under 18 years of age and so forth to 15 years after they turn 18. The civil side is not changed. It can be as short as 2.5 years. We just want to be able to kind of marry that up, and so it's at least the same as on the criminal side. I'm looking forward to hearing your questions, and thank the league and the schools for hosting us here today, and look forward to hearing your questions.
Great, thank you. Next, we'll hear from Senator Zach Walz, representing District 37.
Well, good morning, everybody. For those of you who don't know the exact geographic boundaries of District 37, that is the west side of Iowa City, all of Coralville, rural Johnson County, going up through Newport Township, Penn Township, up to Solon, east over to all of Cedar County, and then the town of Wilton down in Muscatine County. This is my second session that we're just getting started here. I have the honor, privilege, and very large shoes to fill of succeeding Senator Bob Dvorsky, who served in the Iowa Senate for a very long time. I will say the second year, it's kind of nice. Things are starting, it feels like things are slowing down a little bit. I kind of know what to expect. I know how to do stuff. I don't have to just like ask my staff every time I have a question and want to like file a bill. I can actually do a little bit of stuff on my own, so that's nice. I have the pleasure of serving on the Education Committee, the Agriculture Committee, the Ways and Means Committee, which is taxes, and the Appropriations Committee, which is our budget, as well as serving as the ranking member on the Education Budget Subcommittee. The Education Budget Subcommittee is what helps fund our community colleges and our Board of Regents schools, the University of Iowa. It's the Education Policy Committee, which I also serve on, that funds our K-12 schools. So that's been a lot of learning, but this makes the Education Forum something that I'm really passionate about, excited to be here for. My number one issue for the session is going to be to continue to finish the work that we started last year on the issue concerning manufactured housing or mobile homes. Some of you may have seen this issue in the paper or on the news. It's something that continues to be an issue that's continuing to grow in importance. We were able to get a step in the right direction last year, but we weren't able to quite get that over the finish line. We ran out of time as session came to a close, but we've had a bipartisan working group that's continued to meet on this issue and have some really good conversations. We've got a tentative agreement on some, I think, potentially comprehensive reform that would be what we need to see. So we're hoping that we're going to be able to get that over the finish line. I do think that has a tie into education, because when a family has to move, if they've been evicted or what have you, that is a very traumatic event for a child to experience. We had the superintendent of the Iowa City Community School Districts here, and we were chatting late last year about the hundreds of Iowa City Community School District students who live in these homes and who are currently very vulnerable, and so we've got to make sure that we help protect them. A couple other issues that I'm tracking, working on this session are going to be to continue to identify opportunities to support our young, sustainable farmers. I see some of them here in the audience today. They've been very proactive in reaching out, coming to the Capitol. My mom, Dr. Terry Wall, some of you may know, has a big thing for food and healthy food, and we got to make sure that we've got supports for the folks who are growing it. I've also got some legislation in trying to just start the conversation around what are the rules about money in our politics. This is probably a very inside baseball story for most of you, but there's a lobbying group in Des Moines that recently signed a $1.5 million contract with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and I've got some questions about that. A couple other things that I'm working on is a potential ban on conversion therapy for LGBT students. We've got some good conversations happening around that. I want to make sure that we continue to fund new programs for our folks who are learning English as a learning language. We had some big improvements in that last year, and I want to make sure that we keep that going this year. And then finally, I know that we're like 10, I don't know if we have any Democrats here, but we're like, 10 days away from the Iowa caucuses. So I hope all of you who are Democrats, if there are any of you in the audience, are planning to caucus. I want to publicly thank the ICCSD, which has been incredibly helpful in securing those caucus sites, and I look forward to taking your questions.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Representative Bobby Kaufmann, who represents District 73.
Well, thanks for having me. I always enjoy being here, and as probably literally the only Republican in the room, I do appreciate the opportunity to be here. Senator Bolcom, we don't have quite as many colorful bills in the House as you do in the Senate. You have a few more colorful characters than we do, but that is the first time I've ever heard you come out against a tax increase, so I do appreciate that. I'm just kidding. When Joe and I are friends, it's just a joke. When Senator Dvorsky retired, it was well noted that he and I were good friends. I felt like I was getting broken up with. But I do want to take a quick moment and tell all of you from my perspective that Senator Walz has done a tremendous job of filling those shoes. He's constantly at the Capitol working across the aisle with his party doing things. I just want to make sure I stated that publicly. This is an education forum. Happy to answer all those questions. But I wanted to give you a quick state overview of the one thing I have total control over, which is the State Government Committee. We have a lot of representation here, as Representative Lensing and Nielsen serve on that committee with me, and Representative Masher is the ranking Democrat in charge on that committee. So we have a lot of good things going on there. So a lot of these wouldn't probably come up as questions. So I wanted to list off some notable bills. I'll do them quickly so I don't use up my whole time, but then happy to answer any questions on them individually. Just some background. Last year, 31 bills passed our state government committee. 28 of them were bipartisan and 24 became law. Probably our most notable bill last year, we had to fix the way that postal services recognized absentee ballots, and we all came together and passed a bill unanimously, both in the House and in the Senate, that got signed into law. So I think that goes to tell you what Republicans and Democrats work on in our state government committee. There's also a change in policy this year. There's a new speaker, Pat Grassley. He's a personal friend of mine, and I made a request that we do things a little bit differently, that he has obliged, and that is that we traditionally, when Republicans are in control, Republicans run bills, and when Democrats are in control, Democrats run bills. I don't think that should always be that way, and so we are going to, in state government this year, I'm going to have Democrats run some bills. And so already this year I've assigned one to Representative Lensing, so she will lead those efforts. I trust her completely, and we're going to continue to do more things like that. As Senator Kinney, I didn't mean to give you a downgrade, Senator. As Senator Kinney said, we're working on EMS and funding, but the funding that we're working on won't just go to rural Iowa. The funding mechanism in the HHS budget equalizes. All 99 counties get the same dollar amount. So I'm pursuing a robust amount of funding this year. It will get done. The amount I can't tell you yet, but it will get done. And Johnson County, including Iowa City, Coralville, North Liberty, et cetera, will see a large amount of dollars go towards your ambulance services. I am working on a bill we're hoping to drop next week that I will be talking to Senator Walz about in regards to, I'll be sponsoring a conversion therapy ban. The state government committee continues to be the committee where companion animal welfare, fighting dog abuse and kitten and puppy abuse goes through. We have a bill brought to us by the veterinarians this year. Currently, because of patient confidentiality, if a vet believes that a dog or a cat or an animal is getting the crap beat out of it, they actually can't report that to law enforcement because of patient confidentiality. The Veterinarians Association has asked for a bill that would make it permissible for them to report potential animal abuses, and I'm definitely going to be advancing that bill to the best of my ability. We've got the Young Sustainable Farming Bill, as Senator Walz referred to, some government transparency bills. I'm working with the Firefighters Union, and I'm actually running their bill myself, which will equalize some of the work comp issues they have. For instance, if they're carrying a fire hose and a single incident happens, they're covered. But if they're carrying a fire hose for 25 years and that completely ruins their shoulder, they're left out in the cold. And so I'm going to be running that bill personally to equalize that, and I do expect that to become law. We're working on the bottle bill in state government for the first time in a long time. I'm a believer in the expansion of that, as well as to other containers. And then an interesting bill was brought to me when I reached out to Democrats and said, I'd like you to bring bills to me that you think are good. Representative Marty Anderson has a bill that has to do with protections for people that are pregnant in the workplace. And so we're going to be working on those. And then finally, on a bill that's not in state government that I know is of interest to a lot of people here in Johnson County, is I'm in negotiations with the Senate to work on the felon voting rights bill that I passed last year. So thank you for having me, and look forward to all of your questions.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Representative Dave Jacoby, who represents District 74.
Thank you for hosting the forum this morning. And I just wanted to let Bobby know, after hearing his list, I have a change of voter registration card right here. You don't have to necessarily do it publicly. We'll talk afterwards. So we'll see. I'm Dave Jacoby. I serve on the Ways and Means as a ranking member. Also on that committee is Representative Kaufmann and Representative Nielsen. Commerce, natural resources, and economic growth. There's two things we're looking at this year in terms of constitutional amendments. One of them is a constitutional amendment regarding abortion, and the other is a constitutional amendment on guns. I think it's very important for everyone to pay attention, fight for what you believe in, and as a baseline for me, excuse me again, I don't believe anything needs to be changed in our state constitution. Taxes are going to get quite some play this year. It is an election year after all, and I'm talking every tax you can imagine, sales tax in terms of I will, property taxes, income tax, and corporate income tax. And it all comes to play in the I will bill. And I'm proud to say this is in the Democratic House caucus, we've appointed Vicki Lensing to run lead on the I will bill for two reasons. She feels strongly about the environment, and second of all, Vicki gets along with everybody.
True.
No one's ever said that about me.
We like Vicki better.
I know, you like Vicki better. A couple things I'm working on. I did file a bill as far as improving the child care situation in Iowa. I call it the future zones because children are our future. Also, I filed a bill not to shoot black bears. I know the first thing that comes to mind, who the heck cares? Well, I do, and I know a number of you do. Black bear have been spotted in northeastern Iowa, and the bill simply says this, that someone can't see a bear in a tree and just decide to walk out and shoot it. That if the DNR and the legislature decides that there will be a bear season, then we have to have a designated bear season for hunting. But because they've moved into Iowa a bit, and frankly, I go up north quite often, I'm not scared of black bear. They're scared of you. And the odds of them ever hurting someone are tremendously slim. I just want a situation where they're protected unless we decide to have a season, then we can have that debate. Happy to report that the Midwest Rail Pact is seeing some life again this year. Both the Senate and House, both teams, Republicans and Democrats, are looking at that again. And the Midwest Rail Pact Association has deemed Iowa so important to the study of rail that they've forgone our $15,000 fee. Now, I think we could probably afford it, but it goes to show how valuable they think Iowa is in terms of the Midwest Rail Pact. I look forward to the discussion today, and I do want to thank everyone, not to be Davy Downer, but lost my dad a week ago, and my favorite veteran, Korean War vet, a guy who hung aliens, blow up aliens in his house, don't ask. He just believed in aliens and that there's a big cover-up. But what I really want to do is thank you and everyone for all the condolences and kind words that you've sent me and my family, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Mary Masher, who represents District 86.
Thank you, Eliza. I appreciate it. And thank you all for being here and the League for sponsoring these forums. We appreciate it a great deal, and I don't ever want to neglect the opportunity to thank them for all of their good government work. They do a great job. Let's give them a hand. They're amazing. And then I wanted to thank all of the education groups that are here today. We appreciate all of your advocacy and what you do for the students in Iowa, both our youngest students with early childhood and then all the way up to our college students and lifelong learners who are elders. So I just wanted to thank everyone who's here, and we look forward to your questions. I did want to start off with just saying my district is House District 86. That includes the southeast part of Iowa City, the town of Hills, and University Heights. So that gives you kind of an idea of the boundaries there. I serve on the Standing Education Committee in the House. I'm ranking member on state government, as Representative Kaufmann mentioned. I'm on full appropriations in the House, and then I serve on the Transportation, Infrastructure, and Capitals Budget Sub. So those are the committee assignments that I have this year. I wanted to start off with a big shout out to the Brain Research Building that's on the corner of Iowa Avenue and Gilbert Street. We had a dedication there yesterday, and it was a wonderful ceremony. They've been waiting 20 years for that building to actually be started and completed. And so Jody Plummert and Mark Blumberg and all of the college students who were there and celebrating the opening of that building. It was a great event and a good feeling to see that our state dollars are being put to work here in Iowa City and Johnson County. So I wanted to give a shout out to that. It was a great ceremony. I also wanted to shout out to Energy Efficiency Awards were held this week in Des Moines. And it's the Environmental Council that awards them. And we had three, let me say it again, three folks that got nominated and basically received those awards. So it was the Prairie Hill Co-Housing Group, Unitarian Universalist Church for the greenest church in Iowa, and then the Johnson County Solar Project. So we have a lot to be proud of here, and I'm glad to see the state recognizing the efforts that are made in this county towards green and renewable resources. So I want to make sure people understand that the state is seeing it too. On the Ed Committee, we spent one of our afternoons over at the Grimes Building. And they wanted us to get into the building because that's where the Education Department is housed, right? And so at that meeting, we kind of brought up the things that people were concerned about. And what came back to us time and time again across the state is the issues with children's behavioral and mental health, and what we need to be doing to support not only our students, but our teachers in the classroom. We know that it is an enormous issue, and as I said before, it's not just in Iowa City, it's across the state, and we're hearing that across the nation. And just to give you an indicator of that, our teacher prep programs, you know, we always look at the enrollments there. They're down 25 to 35% in Iowa in terms of people going into education. That should be a concern for all of us. The other number that they shared with us, which again I think is an indicator of problems and concerns, they're having a 15% reduction in completion of students who start in the ed programs and then don't complete. So that's down as well. And again, I think we look all the time at what we can do to improve education. The governor proposed a 2.5% supplemental state aid, and many of you know that's our general operating budgets for our school districts, and it's extremely important. We always say that they need at least a 4%, quite frankly, in order for them to be able to continue with the programs they have, and then all of the stresses that we have in the classroom. We know that when they get less dollars, we see larger class sizes, which creates more problems for both teachers and students. So we obviously have a concerted effort and are working really hard to make sure we do what we can at the state level to support our educators and our students. I did want to mention that the universities had requested an $18 million budget increase. In the governor's budget, they were given 15. We're hoping that we can get back to that 18 because that, again, is part of the commitment that we made to them in terms of higher ed, that we would support them. So I'm hoping that that's something that we can do as well. Thank you. I saw the stop sign.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll hear from Representative Vicki Lensing, who represents District 85.
Thank you, and a special good morning to everyone, especially on a dreary morning like this one. I serve on state government, local government, environmental protection, and the Government Oversight Committee. And so some things that I've been working on, you've already heard from my colleagues who also serve on those committees. But let me tell you about a few other things that I'm working on. I'm working with my colleagues on water quality, which is a huge issue, and trying to figure out things that are doable, things that need to be addressed. Where can we go? How can we do it? And so we just started meeting, but hopefully in the next few weeks we'll be able to come up with some ideas on how to move forward on this. This is something that I think crosses party lines, and I think something that we all hear about in our districts. So I certainly invite any of you who have ideas or comments or suggestions to please contact me, because we are working on this pretty wholeheartedly. I am on a subcommittee on open meetings and open records. It seems like I've been on that subject for years, but we keep needing to tweak it to make sure that we are indeed open and transparent in our government. We had our first meeting this past week, and I think I've got several other subs coming up on it, but it's improving what's in law and where there have been problems in legislation that we have passed, trying to correct those. The same could be true on legislation in state government I'm working on that deals with alcohol laws. Some things that we've passed work, some don't, some needs to be improved upon, so we are also trying to tweak some of those things. I've worked on the bottle bill, it seems like, since I was first elected, and including refunds and what types of containers and should we raise, could we raise. And so we've been meeting, I've been meeting with some colleagues on that, and hopefully we'll have something positive to move forward as well. I know that's something I hear from a lot of people in this area about, so again, I invite you to contact me if you have ideas and suggestions on that. Something else that I've worked on in the past has been felon voting rights. I worked when Vilsack was governor, and he issued a proclamation, which was only good while he was governor, to restore voting rights to felons if they have paid all their fines upon their release. It's something now that the legislature is considering maybe and putting in the Constitution, which would have to go to the people for a vote. And I think that's a huge issue, and I know we've talked about it on and off for years, it seems like, and it would be nice to take positive action on that. So again, I think if you have questions or comments, again, I would like to hear from you on that. We have not met yet on the Government Oversight Committee, of which Representative Kaufmann is my chair. I don't know if that's good news or bad news. Often we meet when there are problems, but also we have other responsibilities to receive reports from other government agencies, and I look forward to maybe meeting soon on the Oversight Committee. It's a great committee because it's kind of a catch-all, and it's certainly edification for all of us. We get reports and we hear from different agencies, committees we may not serve on. We get to hear about issues, positive and negative, that are happening, and so I look forward to them meeting. I also look forward to your questions. I know it's early, but there's a lot of things that may be on your minds, and I encourage you to please ask them and get us started this session. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, we'll hear from Representative Amy Nilsson, who represents House District 77.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting us this morning, and of course, all of the wonderful work that you do on behalf of voters here in Iowa. Thank you to the education groups that are here, and I'm sure you guys have some really great questions for us, so I want to get to those. I, this year, have a little bit of different committee assignments. I'm no longer on local government. I know that seems kind of weird, but I am on state government, Ways and Means, and ranking member of Commerce. We just had some pretty big bills drop in Commerce the end of this week, so I don't have a lot of specifics. The one thing that I am really will be digging into this weekend is a bill that would allow Iowa to apply for it's called a 1332 waiver to the ACA. We tried to do this in 2017, but ended up withdrawing the application. But late last year, there were some changes made that will open up new ways for coverage to be denied or reduced, including pre-existing conditions. So it's something that we need to keep a real close eye on, and hopefully I can let you know more about it next month. But like I said, it just dropped, so learning more about it. And that's pretty much all I've got. So looking forward to your questions, and thanks again for being here.
Great. Thanks to each of you for those really informative updates on legislative issues. At this time, we'll begin with questions, starting with one from the League, and then one from each co-sponsor, followed by questions from members of the audience. So I'm going to start with the League question, which any or all of you who would like to answer this would be great, and it's following up on a theme that Mary Masher mentioned. According to the Learning Policy Institute, almost 10% of teachers pack up their desks for good every year. Numbers from the National Center for Education Statistics show there were more than 1/3 fewer students enrolling in teacher preparation programs in 2018 than in 2010. What can be done in Iowa to ensure that we will retain teachers and have candidates to fill future teaching positions in our schools?
I'd say the first thing is to lower class size. We need to have teachers be able to meet the needs of their students, and we know that's really difficult when you've got large class sizes and kids with a lot of needs. I also think we need to have more services in the schools. Those in-school services for mental health and behavioral health are really important. I know our district partners with a lot of private entities to come into the school to provide those counseling services. Not all districts do that, and not all districts have the funding to be able to do that. So we need that children's mental health system to be funded adequately, and I hope Joe and others will talk a little bit about that, because we have the adult system in place. There are issues and problems with that, but we don't have a funding source for the children's system, and we need that to be able to make sure kids have services available in their communities. So I think there's a number of things that we can do in that regard. We've also talked about a poverty level increase for students who have poverty needs. We know that they are oftentimes are at-risk children, and they also are more likely to drop out of school and not complete graduation. So the more we can do to, again, help those students, and maybe having another kind of formula for at-risk and those students that are in poverty, to be able to identify that. So those are some of the things that we've been talking about. We need to stop talking about it, and we need to do something. So that's the other piece of this. So let's get the funding figured out this year and make sure that it's there long-term to support the kids who need it.
And I think just two things. We need to restore bargaining rights for teachers, and I think we need to restore the respect that teachers deserve, and we're not showing them that right now in Des Moines.
I have 7 K through 12 public school teachers in my immediate family, and I would passionately disagree with Representative Jacoby that we don't show teachers the respect they deserve, and I couldn't say that more emphatically. That being said, I completely agree with Representative Masher that this is the year we've put forth the infrastructure on adult mental health. We've put forth the infrastructure on children's mental health. The time for talking is over, and the time for funding those at a rate and a level that is sustainable and predictable. I actually agree with Joe that taking mental health funding off of the county and putting it on the state does provide some unpredictability that is not good and is not sustainable, and that's why you haven't seen the House just come running and jumping into the arms of that proposal. So I think those two things would go a long way towards helping our schools. In addition to that, I also agree there should be a formula for at-risk and for those in poverty. I don't sit on the education committee, so I don't get to see these things on the front lines as much as I do other things, but I am lending my voice and support. It was the second thing I put in my column last week, and the things that I'm sharing with my caucus when we're having these discussions.
Just a brief rebuttal, if I may. I too have teachers in my family. I have teachers in my family in both the public and private school systems, and I hear from them on a monthly basis how downtrodden they're feeling from people on the outside putting more on their plate when we're not giving them enough resources. So maybe we should have a family Thanksgiving together, and we'll see what the teachers hammer out after the day.
Let's take you up on that.
Okay.
I would echo what Representative Jacoby said on the bargaining rights piece. In my district up in Solon, we had a knockout fight between teachers and the school district. I know that there was kind of a complicated story up there, but we wound up seeing a huge number of teachers leave that district after that fight went in a way that a lot of teachers did not feel like they were respected. I don't know if we have any Solon educators here today, but I do know that was something that a lot of people were really concerned about. I think the question specifically is how do we retain teachers in Iowa over the long term? And one thing that I want to make sure is on everybody's radar is the fact that we're going to be seeing some continued demographic challenges in this state over the next 10 to 20 years. Senator Bolcom and I had the opportunity recently to visit with some folks at the University of Iowa who, you know, it's kind of their job to look at this 10-year horizon of enrollment for their institution. And we know that the number of 18-year-olds who are going to be graduating from an Iowa high school in 10 years is going to be dramatically lower than it is today. And the reason for that is that in 10 years, 18 years earlier will have been the start of the Great Recession, and folks stopped having as many kids. And so we have this big existential question as a state of how are we going to be making sure that we are able to keep these institutions of higher education open that are training our teachers and then trying to bring more people in from out of state. Now that's kind of a longer term 10-year plus question, but if we don't start talking about it now, we're going to be caught totally flat-footed by the time that actually hits. And so I think it's really important. And one of my top priorities being on that higher education budget committee is making sure that the governor's office is being briefed on this kind of looming demographic challenge that we're facing and that we're taking the appropriate steps. And because this is going to apply not just to teachers, it's going to apply to many of our other highly skilled professions as well, whether that's on healthcare, mental health services, and all kinds of things. So that's something that I'm really watching very carefully, and I think that we need some action on.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I would agree. People that go to college have choices, and if you want more people going into education, we need to make sure that people see education as a profession that is, supported and respected and appreciated. I think the collective bargaining changes we made were seen by people in the education community as kind of a big disrespect, right? People want to know they're going to get a decent wage, that they have good benefits for them and their families. And in Iowa, we have this thing called IPERS, some income security or retirement security, right? We kind of undermine two of those three things with the collective bargaining. So, it's just like it's the economy, right? I mean, people have a choice what they're going to do with their lives and their professions. And restoring collective bargaining would improve salaries, improve benefits, which everybody in the workplace is interested in. I mean, I think the challenge to Iowa now is we're going to lose the teachers that we're training in Iowa to places like Minnesota where they can make more money, have better benefits. So, right, it's just like, let's wake up. If Iowa wants to have good teachers and retain them, it's about how do you treat them. I agree with Representative Masher on the class size reduction. When somebody's in a classroom and they need to be able to manage it, they need to be able to feel like they're making results with the kids. And if the class sizes are so big, it's a challenge. And then the third thing, this is a more macro thing, we have to deal with poverty. There's too many families with kids arriving in those classrooms, and we expect the schools to solve all the problems. We need to boost family income through the minimum wage increase. If we're going to do anything with a regressive sales tax, we ought to be boosting our earned income tax credit, which goes to families in poverty and as a help. So we've got to do more to put more money into these families' pockets. It will help a lot to have their kids be successful.
Thank you.
I think to underscore what's already been said, today's schools are not like the schools we went to. I think our teachers do more than educate. They have to be aware of needs that our kids have, whether it's poverty issues, whether it's food insecurity, whether they have learning disabilities. I think we place more responsibility in our teachers' hands than they're adequately prepared to deal with. And I also think it's recognizing the mental health issues we see today are not the same as there were 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago. And so our teachers who spend, 8 hours a day with our kids, see and can identify more things with our kids maybe than we can. So I think any way that we can help support educators, some of it's funding and some of it's policies we can put in place, sometimes I think we need to listen to our educators and do what we can to keep them doing the good things they do, whether they're required to do it or not, for our children in our schools.
Thank you. Any other? Okay. Well, thank you all very much. Now I'd like to invite the co-sponsors of this forum to ask questions. And could we start with the Iowa City Community School District? And please mention your name.
Morning, I'm Charlie Easttown. I'm a member of the Iowa City Community School District Board of Educators. There are 2 or 3 other school board members in the audience this morning, so I may get corrected as I go along here. And I also want to say that I'm speaking simply as myself as a school board member and not for the school board or the district itself. I want to talk this morning. I'm sorry.
Can you speak up?
Oh, I'm okay.
There you go. A little
Thanks.
closer
Thank you. I want to talk this morning about student achievement and get your your thoughts on this, on what the school district is doing here. We recently received the Iowa statewide assessment of student progress for 2018 and 2019. I think the board has this in its packet for our upcoming meeting. In the area of English language arts for 11th grade students, the number of students, or the percentage of students who are proficient on that on this assessment for the Iowa City's community school districts, for Black or African American students, 32.5% were proficient. For Hispanic Latino students, 47.7% were proficient. And for white students, 80% were proficient. Those numbers are very comparable to the statewide average. These academic achievement disparities, which this is just simply one example, have been consistent for more than, in my view, more than 2 decades, probably much longer, and over periods of higher and lower school funding. The Iowa City Community School District has recently adopted, we did this at our last meeting, a comprehensive diversity, equity, and inclusion plan because the district believes that all students can achieve at high levels and that equitable classrooms are essential to their success. The district also believes that eliminating disparities in educational opportunities is fundamental to the nature of public education. I would like to ask for your thoughts, especially members of the various legislative educational committees, on what you believe that the state can do to assist this district and other districts as we attempt to eliminate student achievement gap disparities.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm going to actually ask, I'm not on education, but coming from a school board for 9 years before being elected to the Senate, one of the things that I really feel that we can do is early childhood education, pre-K. We need to get these kids involved at an early age. And when you get these kids involved at an early age, they're going to achieve when they get older. They're going to become interested in education. And that's where I feel that we're going to need to start. And the state could have an impact on that.
I completely second Senator Kinney's view on this. I was very glad to hear Governor Reynolds' call for expanded access to child care, early childhood education in her condition of the state address, and I really hope that we see movement on that this year. I think another really important piece of tackling the achievement gap is making sure that we have more non-white teachers in the classroom. I think that's really important. I know that that is something that is being discussed at the state level. I'm not necessarily sure at this point yet what form that will take, but I do think that the research on this is very, very clear. When non-white students have a non-white teacher at an early age, the educational outcomes through the rest of their elementary school, junior high school, college, all of that is much, much stronger. I still remember the first non-white teacher I had, Diana Henry, who I don't see here today, but I know that she is a league member. She was my social studies teacher in the 5th and 6th grade at Weber Elementary. She was a phenomenal teacher. But if memory serves, she was the only non-white teacher at Weber Elementary. And especially in a state where now we've seen since 2010, 40% of Iowa's population growth has come from immigrants, from refugees, from places that frankly don't look a lot like Iowa. We got a lot of work to do, and I think that making sure that we have more non-white teachers in the classroom would be a really big step in that direction.
I just was going to add to it, I agree totally with the previous speakers that it is early childhood education and it is recruitment and retaining our African American teachers. I know the district has been paying a lot of attention to this, Charlie, and I know your school board members have been passionate about it. I know the teachers have been entering into that discussion and debate as well, and they're trying to help with what they believe should happen within our district. There are districts right now, and I know know ours has worked on this as well. They call it a grow your own kind of a system, where we're looking at our associates and identifying those who are passionate about students and learning and education, who are minority paraeducators, and recruiting them into the teaching profession. I know in Des Moines, they actually help those folks with tuition so they can get the education that they need, and then they also provide that education in the school after they're done with their paraeducator responsibilities. So they actually have educators, professors coming to the school and teaching after the hours and making that available so the students are able to get that education for their teaching degrees right in the building where they teach. So I look at things like that where they're thinking out of the box and trying to identify what can we do to provide those role models so kids see people like themselves in those educator roles. So I think it's really critical, it's important. The early childhood efforts that we've done here in this community with the chamber and our ICAD group, and then the Women's Foundation has been working on that. Zach's a board member on that. They're looking at what can we do as a community in Johnson County to provide those early childhood opportunities. We're the only county in the state that does not have that local option sales tax. Wouldn't it be a great idea to use a portion of that for our poverty students and our early childhood programs, so we have more available for the kids who need it? Because you're right, the sooner we intervene, Representative Kenny, in a child's life, the better off they all are. So those are the solutions, and I think you hit it on the head.
I also think that one of the things that that we can do, and this comes from my experience on serving at the Iowa City Community School District Equity Committee with Charlie, but also the CDAC committee, is we need to be a lot more culturally inclusive. And I think that the last couple years, the legislature has not made people who look different than me feel welcome here in Iowa. And I think that we need to stop being scared of bringing other cultures and other ideas into our classrooms and into our curriculum. I listened to many mothers when I was sitting on the CDAC committee come in and talk about how, because they're refugees and they don't understand, Iowa, they don't understand the United States, they understand that their kids are going to go to school and get an education. But they don't understand the framework, the organization that we have set up and the rules. And so I think that talking to people who are of different cultures and who are of different ideas and beliefs is hugely important. And that I think that at the state level, we need to start looking at putting a little bit more pressure, at least, if not mandating, that schools actually start that conversation, open that dialogue, and be more culturally inclusive.
I think there's a tremendous amount of energy given by teachers already on this topic, which is fantastic. Personally, there's a teacher in the room that helped my youngest daughter stay in high school because she was struggling. It's also about belonging and connection. And that's where our teachers are doing a fantastic job with the resources that they have. One of the stories that sticks with me the most as I work with the STEM Hub and doing STEM and K-12s is an 11th grade young woman up at Metro High School. And she joined the robotics team. And I had sat with her for a minute talking to her and said, "What made you join the robotics team?" And she teared up and said, "This is the first time in my life that I've ever been on a team." Now, coming from a place like Johnson County where you have tons of teams, I have a closet full of dance outfits that I will sell you. But here I realize with this young woman, she talked about her life a little bit, and as a 17-year-old young woman, had never had the opportunity to be on a team, and a teacher had asked her to be on this robotics team, and when she teared up saying this is the first time she's ever been on a team, that's when I thought, we keep talking, class size is the number one of importance, but again, respected our teachers, because you they are on the front line, and they're doing everything they can to make children and students feel involved. And when she told me her story, I said, sometimes maybe we're overthinking things. We have to go right to the core. And I talked to the teacher at Metro High School who brought her in. And that's what we need to do with all students. Make sure that teachers and school districts have a mechanism to bring the kids in and feel like they belong to something.
I want to preface my comments by stating that I would be supportive of a school that had 100% teachers of color, 100% teachers of non-color. I'm not going to sit here and try to dictate what those are, but I am going to push back pretty strongly on the notion that only a white teacher can teach white kids and only a teacher of color can teach kids of color. I find that to be absurd, and I have evidence to prove it. My aunt has taught second and third grade for over 20 years in a largely urban area. She has rarely had a classroom that is not 50% and over minority children. I have watched as those kids have grown up and come back and student taught in her classroom. I'm friends with a lot of them. None of them are white. And they have said that she, and the things that she was able to do to relate to them was tremendous. So I'm not going to assign a specific color that you need to have students being taught in a classroom, because I think we can do both, and I think teachers of color can teach white kids, and I think that white teachers can, you know what I'm trying to say.
I just have to respond. Representative Kaufmann, you're absolutely right. White teachers can teach Black and African American children or Hispanic children. That's not the point. For African American children to succeed, they need role models that look like them. And that's what this is about. They need to see people that can be successful teachers in a classroom, and they can be African American. Hispanic children need the same thing. They need people who look like them to be their role models, to show them the path that they can also be successful. Charlie, I'm going to add one more statistic. We brag about our graduation rates in Iowa. We're the highest in the nation. Over 90% of our kids graduate from high school. It's 67% for African American children. We're losing them. So while your aunt may be teaching those kids, not all of them are graduating. And our white children have a much higher rate of graduation as a result. So we, as a society, need to provide those role models. And I think it's really important that we discuss this and talk about it, because if there were African Americans in the room, they would all be shaking their head and saying, yes, this is what needs to happen. So thank you.
Yeah, I would just offer, going back to the question of poverty in our communities, and to the degree to which poverty is an indicator of the achievement gap. We know that poverty is an indicator of health disparities among African American and Latino Iowans as compared to Caucasian Iowans. I think trying to do policy around putting more money in the hands of people living in poverty will go a long way to address both of those. We've had really good bipartisan support for this thing called the Earned Income Tax Credit. It's a federal policy that puts money at tax time into people that are really poor, the poorest people in our communities. And it's probably the single most important program in the country that actually lifts households out of poverty. The state piggybacks on the federal policy, and actually if when we talk about tax credits, it's one of the tax credits the state spends the most money on. This year we'll spend about $73 million of state money, and it'll go to a couple 100,000 households, those households that make around $50,000 or less. And we boosted that in 2013 when we did the property tax bill. It's probably time to revisit that and make a change, especially if there's a move to raise the sales tax. One of the ways to offset the regressive part of that is to think about putting some resources through other tax policy into those households. But I think we've got to make poverty a much bigger policy agenda item, because I think it affects families and kids in a lot of different ways.
Next, I'd like to invite a question from the Iowa City Education Association.
Hi, good morning. I'm Brady Shutt, president of the Iowa City Education Association. I'd like to start off by thanking the League for hosting this event and for all the registration efforts that they put forth. This is a big year with the centennial of the 19th Amendment, and so I know they've been out in the community and the schools. They do a fantastic job. And I appreciate the question about how to attract and retain teachers. I think that's a topic that we need to absolutely all of us together be engaged on. And also, here we are in Iowa. We're a week and a little bit away from the Iowa caucus, so the spotlight is on us, right, nationally. And we're in the third ever impeachment trial of a sitting president. And things are, a little tense around nationally. I'd just like to say to the state legislative people, legislators who are here, I really appreciate your civility, your decorum, and your collegiality, your sense of humor. You don't all agree on issues, but I really appreciate and thank you for all, being here with us and for your work together. I think that there's a lot. We don't have to agree. That's what democracy is supposed to look like. So I appreciate everyone up here. This is my 25th year of teaching, and I'm proud to be the president of the Teachers Association. I'm proud to be a public school educator. It's been the dream of my life. It's the best thing that I ever chose to do. And we are in the front lines of mental health needs of our students and our community, and money does matter. And so my question is going to gear toward SSA. The School Administrators of Iowa asked for 3.75%. ISEA, my state-level organization, asked for 3%. I thought something our district did, the Iowa City School District did, that was really clever and smart and appropriate as they looked at their 10-year costs and made an average, and that was 4.5% of cost increases across the 10 years. And that's just to sustain and grow a little bit of what we're doing and to meet our needs. And therefore, they put forth a legislative ask of 4.5%. I thought that was incredibly smart. So as an organization, we tied into that. Because what that means is we could consider wraparound preschools. We could increase the number of student family advocates. We could increase the number of counselors that we have. We could increase the number of teacher librarians, who often are the centers of our innovative approaches in our maker spaces. We could have administrative teams that do outreach to our community groups, and more classroom teachers to lower class sizes. So the governor has 2.5% out there, and obviously you have the power of the purse. And we're really hopeful that that's a starting point, but that we're going to go above that. And I like all of you to have the opportunity to talk on that issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the 2.5% is a number that is affordable and reasonable. You look at the investment in K-12 education since 2011, it's $863 million. You add the additional $92 million that the 2.5% would bring in, and you're looking at nearly a $1 billion investment since 2011. That's nearly 40% of our state budget. So while we may not quite reach the number that you're wanting today, I don't have any problem standing on my record when it comes to education spending. The Cedar Rapids Gazette, not known to be a conservative bastion, wrote an article with statistics. I don't have it on me, but I'd be happy to send it to anybody that would like it if you didn't read it, that shows that Iowa is third in the nation since the Great Recession of the percentage of our budget that goes towards education. So the trifecta in California, the trifecta in Massachusetts, and a host of other states that hold complete Democrat control, that have all collective bargaining rights, didn't and have not and are continuing to not fund education at the level as a percentage of our budget that we are. So 2.5% is something I think is affordable. It's something that I can push for, and I think it's something that we can promise and make sure that you actually get.
Yeah, one of the statistics that's often cited by our friends on the other side is in these national figures is they kind of double count the infrastructure money that used to be raised by local districts on a county by county basis, where we had essentially paying for new schools or improvements to schools. It was based on a local option tax that was voted on. A few years ago, we said, well, we're up to 97 counties. Let's make it a statewide tax, right? So that now is counted as some sort of increased spending by the state, when in fact 97 of 99 counties were putting that money into school infrastructure. So so anyway, I think it's a little bit inflated. Over the 10-year period, the last 10 years, I don't think we have not, SSA has not kept up with inflation, right? We've had these years when it's been 0% increase, 1.1%. I mean, I think last year was 2.1 was the highest, was one of the higher numbers, but we haven't kept up with inflation. One of the reasons things are a little bit chaotic in our schools is class sizes have grown, behavior and mental health problems have grown, English language learners have grown, and to keep up with what kids need, we actually need to beat inflation by a sizable amount. And so, you can add up these numbers and say we're doing this, but let's just go into Iowa classrooms, let's talk to Iowa teachers and take their temperature on how things are going. But more broadly, the state budget is going to be tight. Medicaid's going to eat up a bunch of the new money that's proposed because our MCOs need to be fed. And I think if we can do 2.5%, it's going to be a big deal. It's about $100 million. And it's going to stress the Republicans who are going to put this budget together to find those resources.
Senator, I'm not going to let you say that I'm fibbing without a retort. Are you familiar with the Midwest Consumer Price Index? They're the ones that gauge standard inflation. Do you know what inflation's gone up since 2011? 13.47%. Do you know how much education spending has increased since 2011? 35%. So don't say that I'm inflating numbers.
So one of the things that I think, how, Brady, you talked about how we can agree to disagree. One of the things that has happened with our education funding is in order for us to get the dollars that the education community needed, there had to be property tax relief. And so they count that as well in the education funding, even though not a dime goes to the schools to fund their programs. It goes to reducing property tax at the local level. So we need to be honest with taxpayers when we talk about education funding. Yeah, that goes into that education pot, but it doesn't go to schools. I'm just kind of incredulous sometimes when I hear this, because those of you sitting in the audience may not know that. A number of educators do. I know our superintendent Murley knows that, and I know our school board members know that, because what you do all the time in order to get the funding, then you had to do the property tax. That was the only way it could go through. And so we've agreed to a lot of this in order for us to get a little bit, just a little bit, that goes towards schools. And that's what we did with the Save Penny as well. A portion of that has to go to property tax relief. Doesn't go to the schools. And so we need to be honest with people about where the money is going. Thank you.
So I think that there are a couple of ways that you can cut this, right? You've got inflation, you've got SSA, we've got stuff happening to the sales tax, Save Penny, local option sales tax. One of the things that I really appreciate about being a new legislator is that you get to just ask lots of questions, like why are we here? Like what's going on? What are these numbers? I wasn't here in 2011, I wasn't here in 2013. And at a recent education forum, Charlie Eastham, a newly elected member of the school district, asked, well, what should the number be? Kind of a novel question. Well, kind of setting aside what things are, where things have been, what should it be, right? So, I think the parallel here is what do we want in our education system? Understanding that we have relatively, there are limits on resources. We don't have, a money printing machine, right? We're not the federal government. What are the desired federal or our desired state outcomes in education? And I think that we can go into a classroom today. We have really great facilities, we had this great bond issue here in the ICCSD. We're making some big improvements compared to when I was at West High, and I'm sitting there after lunch in Mr. Kerpus's classroom falling asleep during freshman geometry because it was so darn hot that I couldn't, bring myself to stay awake. And I think that you can see that class sizes are growing. Virtually every school district in the state of Iowa has a deficit on special education. We know that even though we have some of these big improvements happening to facilities, things are not where we want them to be. And so, we can debate, should the number be 2.5%? Should the number be 4%? Should it be 4.5%? Should it be 6? We can definitely talk about that. But I think that part of the conversation has to be, what are the goals? Like, what do we really want our Iowa education system to look like? And I think that we should all be able to agree that we're not where we want it to be. This state has a rich legacy of being, right there at the very top of the best educated state in Iowa. And I see the stop sign, but the reality is that today it's not what it used to be. And so I'm not saying that we need to make Iowa great again, but I do think that we can all agree that we're not where we want to be.
Well, the other choice we've made, that Republicans made in 2017, well, we have this money that you all give us, and they decided to do a tax cut in 2017 to the income tax. Over a 5-year period, it took away $2.1 billion away from the state revenue. Now, there's no question that K-12, we've invested in it, and it's a lot of money, and it grows. And when you add it all up, Representative Kaufmann's done that, it is a lot of money. But we did make a choice about the opportunity cost of giving this massive tax increase. By the way, 46% of the $2.1 billion over this 5 years went to 2.6% of the richest taxpayers, right? Nearly half of the tax cut went to less than 3% of taxpayers. Then we're over here with the budget, and we've got, can we do 2.1? Can we do 2.5? Is it 1%? We're scratching and clawing for money for the schools when and we're scratching and clawing because they made this other policy decision to give a big tax cut to rich people that they didn't need, but they got. So, yes, schools cost a lot. Yes, education costs a lot. But we've had the resources to fix some of these problems. We've had resources to invest in the kids' mental health system. But they made different choices. In the governor's tax plan, and it's going to get changed. We're not going to do what she wants. But if they pass a massive tax cut this year, we will continue to have this conversation about not having enough money for the children's mental health system, not having enough money for local schools, community colleges, public universities, because, in fact, the new chair of the Senate Ways and Means Committee has last week called for elimination of the income tax in Iowa. Thank you.
Senator, do you know what percentage of the 2017 tax law is actually taken into effect?
Probably, do you want to debate this? There's two pieces to it.
Correct.
And we're in the fourth year. Mm-hmm. This year we'll give up about $540 million.
Only a 4% growth is achieved.
No, the second, we haven't gotten to the triggered part.
That's what I was getting to.
Yeah, that's another $500 million. And actually, that part of that's good because we couple with the federal standard deductions, which are good for middle-class people, but it's also $500 million of state revenue that won't be available to spend on other things. The governor has proposed getting rid of the 4% year-over-year growth, which, by the way, we're never going to achieve. So it's good to get rid of that if you want another tax cut to really rich people, because
no one's proposing that in the House.
Yeah.
So I interrupted because oftentimes Senator Bolcom gets concerned about Senate bills and just imposes that as if it's the will of the House, and that's not the way things are going in the House. There's no Ways and Means chair in the House that says of zero income taxes. So I just want to make sure that we're talking about Senate proposals as opposed to House proposals.
That's fair.
Well, one thing I will mention between the House and the Senate is neither one did jack stuff in the tax credit reviews this year. And I know we're talking about our House or set it in funding K-12, but we didn't do our due diligence. The chairperson said, well, we don't have time.
Agreed.
What the hell? Oh, I'm sorry, is this live?
Yes.
What the heck is, that's what we're there for. That's what we're elected to do. We should have started the tax credit review back in May when we got done. We should have continued it, and we should frankly be doing it in Ways and Means right now. There's tax credits I'll admit I support, but I want to see proof that they indeed work. And that goes to the funding of K-12 and available revenues. Personally, I'd like to see every year a 3+1. 3% is built in, plus 1% for STEAM activities built into school programs. And I know a lot of schools are already doing it. So that would bring it to 4. And this is just me, I think the school budget should be done on a 2-year cycle. Instead of year to year, administrators spending so much time trying to whittle through where they are right now. Let's do it on a 2-year cycle.
I agree.
Speak into the mic.
I agree.
Okay.
That's been recorded. Next, I'd like to invite a question from the American Association of University Professors.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lauren Glass, professor of English at the University of Iowa and president of the University of Iowa chapter of the American Association of University Professors. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for facilitating this, and thank you all for making your time to listen to your constituents' questions. A lot of people don't know that more than 50% of the classes at the University of Iowa are taught by faculty who are not on the tenure track, which means that they cannot and will not benefit from the job security and due process rights that those of us on the tenure track do receive. In the past few years, the SEIU's Faculty Forward has been attempting to organize these folks. This is an uphill battle, particularly with the recent revision to the collective bargaining laws. So I guess I'm asking you if you're willing to put out your vocal support for Faculty Forward's efforts and encourage the president of the university and the central administration to recognize them as a union and work with them in good faith. Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lauren. You know, there's that whole issue of we want good professors in education. We need, or in any area, we need to make sure that they're compensated and there's job security. Right now, there's none. And we wonder why those young people are leaving Iowa and are not having those opportunities. That's why. If they don't see a future here, they leave. And we lose some of our best talent. So the more we can do to keep them here in the state and to have them providing that education for anybody who chooses to go to a region institution, the better off we're all going to be. So thank you for the question.
Yeah, yes, yes, and yes.
Yes, because we need to, and our students deserve those teachers that want to be here, that are secure, that feel secure. I just think that if we're attacking those teachers, it's eventually going to come into the classroom, and we need to support them.
Yeah, I mean, I've signed there's a petition or a letter or something, and I know that I think probably most of us up here have signed it and do support those non-tenure track faculty. I do think that there, you know, to some extent, you know, you've got some folks who adjunct and teach like one class a week, and maybe that's not quite the full protections. But for people for whom this is their full-time earning, I mean, like, of course, those protections should be there. And then I would also, you know, I know that we had changes to the collective bargaining system, and one of the changes was this whole recertification election piece, and it sounds like you were alluding to that as complicating your organizing efforts. And you know, one of the things that, to me, I wasn't here when that happened, but I find distressing about that is that a non-vote is a no vote, and that's like not how democracy works. So that should probably be changed too.
on this question, I'm not looking to be combative. I need to learn more. So, and I was trying to whisper to Senator Wall so I could understand better. So are you saying that the adjunct/part-time professors that aren't tenured are treated differently than the ones that are tenured? Yes. And you're looking to equalize that?
Lauren, come to the mic.
Please.
Yeah.
Sorry, is it okay if he comes up and answers? I'm looking to learn about this. This is the first time I'm hearing about this.
The faculty who are not on the tenure track are in fact a large and complex and amorphous group of people. So it's hard to count them and in fact challenging to find the correct words to refer to them. But it is important to know that a lot of people are teaching full-time twice as much for half as much as the tenured faculty. So it's true, there's a lot of people at the business school just teaching one class for actually a lot of money. And then there's a lot of clinical track people who have different sorts of guarantees. But there is a sizable group of people who are teaching full-time jobs dedicated to these jobs who are not on the tenure track, will never get tenure, and then will never benefit from the kinds of job security and the due process rights that those folks get. And those folks, the full-time folks not on the tenure track, those are the folks that are the main target and organizational base for the faculty forward efforts, which is a national group, right? So SEIU has this arm of their organizing that is working to organize specifically this growing population. We're not the only state in the union, obviously, that has this challenge. So it is true. It's not. There are a number of folks who are adjuncts or non-tenure track people who are perfectly happy with their jobs because they're just visiting for a semester to teach at public policy or whatever. And I don't think those folks are worried about their benefits or their job security. It's more the contingent faculty teaching full-time, not always knowing from year to year what their job security is going to be, whether they're going to have a job. I will say that the university has made some good faith efforts to respond to this, so this is not like a deep critique of everything that they've done. But they certainly don't want to recognize a union for these folks, right? There's resistance to that, and a lot of them do want to have union representation through SEIU.
Thank you for that. So Representative Masher, would this be along the same lines of the firefighter union issue that I'm supporting, where we're just making their work comp rise equal to what everybody else gets? Is this the same kind of
Sure.
orbit?
Yeah, that's exactly the way it is.
She knows what I'm getting at. I would love to learn more because I'd be open to signing your petition and helping push for it, because to me it's just about all the different faculty being treated the same.
Great, we'll communicate.
Okay.
And if I haven't signed, make sure I sign before I leave today. But Senator Walls brought up a key component of that collective bargaining bill that people sometimes don't follow the full consequences. When you have to have the majority vote of all eligible voters. Just to let you know, if my numbers are correct, approximately 42 people who serve in the Iowa House would not be sitting there right now if we had to go by the same election that you do to certify for a collective bargaining unit. So I find that very interesting that you have a discrepancy there. And I think that's something that we're going to be working on this year to bring a more fair vote to the certification process.
I agree.
Lauren, could you come back to the mic? I know one of the issues is that we've got more adjuncts teaching classes now than we ever have before.
And that trend will continue, there's no doubt.
Okay, and then we also didn't talk about the COGS group.
Yes.
And those are our graduate assistants.
Well, I only had one question, so I...
Well, I'm asking you another. So if you could respond to their challenges, because right now they're struggling as well.
COGS, which is the Campaign to Organize Graduate Students, so they do have a union, and they have managed, in fact, as many of you know, the initial renewals were overwhelming in response to the change in the collective bargaining laws. So it's clear that these folks wanted to remain organized, and COGS has been doing their best to live with these new terms. I don't know all the details of their current negotiations. I know that the administration has at least made gestures towards recognizing those terms of the contracts which they no longer are legally bound to recognize. I will also say, and I don't want to get into all the complexities of how these things are staffed, but our graduate graduate student populations are actually shrinking, so a lot of these adjuncts that we're talking about are now being moved into doing the teaching that they used to do, right? So a lot of the gen ed classes that used to be taught by the graduate students who were unionized are now being taught by adjuncts and contingent faculty who are not unionized, and so that's another challenge that COGS has had. COGS is a great union. It's been around since the 90s. It's supported our graduate students through all of that period. In fact, a lot of our graduate students move on to become union organizers, as many, and so it's been a great training spot for them too. But yeah, like all unions in the state, they are struggling, but they have renewed, and they're still there.
Thank you. Don't go away. You said the graduate student population is shrinking. Do you have any numbers behind that?
Unfortunately, I only have our numbers in English, which are more dire than other graduate programs. The English graduate program has shrunk considerably, partly under my, when I was DGS, I'd say we've shrunk almost by half in the last 10 or 20 years. And there's generally a shrinkage of the kind of professional positions available for graduate students who get their PhDs than there used to be. And so a lot of people are making what is, after all, a logical decision to not commit to a 5, 6, 7, 8-year education when it doesn't look like there is a job on the other end of it. This unevenly affects different disciplines. I don't know how it is in chemistry or physics or whatever, although I don't know of anyone who's growing. So overall, across the country, the population of graduate students is shrinking, but with different percentages depending on what college or department you're talking about. Universities in general have been less willing to commit to tenure track jobs, so if even disciplines that are healthy and continuing to thrive as centers of professional knowledge, there are still fewer of the types of jobs that we have traditionally trained people for.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think as state support to public universities, not only here in Iowa but across the country, has grown, you still have to have faculty, right?
Yes.
And there's a cost thing going on here, right? They want adjunct and part-time and folks that aren't recognized for tenure track. Is really a failure of state legislatures across the country and here in Iowa to adequately fund this university. So they have to do these exotic things to have teachers in the classrooms. And it actually led to the university signing this P3 deal, which essentially had them borrowing $1.165 billion over the next 50 years in order to use that money to bring a little bit more resource to the campus.
Yeah, I have an editorial in the DI yesterday responding to the P3. I welcome the money, but I deeply object to the privatization of a public institution. I'm philosophically opposed to that.
So we back to the tax question. We had this opportunity cost. We said Republicans said we're going to give all this money to these people over here, and then we look over here and we open the cupboard doors, and the cupboards don't, things are kind of thin. We just don't have the resources.
Lauren, the only good thing I think that could come out of P3 is the fact that those union workers who are at the physical plant will be able to organize under the federal collective bargaining law because they're private now.
Yeah. Oh,
and they
interesting.
would not be subject to our restrictive state bargaining laws.
Unintended consequences.
Exactly. And they are working on organizing those folks.
That's great to hear.
And it's an enormous benefit for them. Yeah. Because they'll actually be able to work under the federal bargaining law, not the state.
I think it would be good if we would move on to the last co-sponsor question so that we have time for questions from the audience. And the last question will come from the University of Iowa Public Policy Center Social and Education Research Program.
Yes, hello. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you, League of Women Voters, for hosting this. My name is Rachel. I'm a graduate research assistant at the Public Policy Center. During the last 5 years of evidence-based and data-driven partnerships with the Iowa City School District and University of Iowa, we have developed policies in which institutions commit to diversity, equity, and inclusion in education that surpass federal and state compliance, making strides in addressing disparities in student experiences by race, sexual orientation, income, and gender. For example, we recently worked with the school district to form their diversity, equity, and inclusion plan through a data-informed, evidence-based, and inclusive process of decision-making. We actually formed a development group made up of students, parents, teachers, community members, administrators that address things like Charlie mentioned, reducing the opportunity gap for structurally disadvantaged students. And another example, the LGBTQ task force worked with the district to release administrative guidelines to provide plans for things such as privacy, names and pronouns, and inclusive curriculums. These policy statements exhibit a future-focused and student-driven vision and provide a basis to dedicate funds and develop programming specific to serving structurally disadvantaged students. The question is, what will you do to advocate a similar display of proactive leadership in the Iowa education legislation?
Thank you.
I would consider myself open to learning. I don't have a solution to give you, but I can give you some background that will show that I'm open to listening. I've partnered multiple times with Iowa Safe Schools in Des Moines, specifically their, I think he's the president, leader, whatever you want to call it, Nate Monson. Are you familiar with Nate? So Nate Monson's the head of the Iowa Safe Schools. I think they're the biggest LGBTQ organization in the state. He and I are working on the conversion therapy ban together, something that Utah, of all states, just did. So the Mormon Church, the Catholic Church, and the LGBTQ community came together and agreed to this conversion therapy ban. Now, there's different variations of it. Some would say that it's not as strong as they would like it to be. And then I probably shouldn't even go out here and talk about this yet because I don't know enough because I haven't seen the bill yet. But there is a bill, and Zach, maybe you'll know more about this. I apologize for making this a lengthy explanation, but right now, if a spouse comes home and sees that their significant other is cheating and they murder them, that is a lessened possible crime in the court's eyes. Crime of passion, for instance. Several states have had people attempt to use someone's gender as that similar crime of passion. Well, I killed them because they're gay, so that's more okay, which is obviously preposterous. I don't know more about this, maybe Zach does, but I'm the one that's going to be floor managing that bill in the Judiciary Committee to make that illegal, that's an insane defense that nobody should be able to use.
Thank you.
So the gay or trans panic defense is something that I introduced as an amendment last year to a bill. It was ruled non-germane. We're introducing it as its own bill this year. We've got that bill request in the Senate. Glad to hear it's going to hopefully move in the House.
Zach, could you repeat the term?
Gay or trans panic defense. The idea being that, somebody hits on you, they're gay, you panic, you kill them, and somehow that's like defensible, which obviously it's not. The conversion therapy ban, we're working on language. There's a lot of different interest groups that are trying to get to be satisfied with that. That would be a big step forward if we're able to find a compromise that people are satisfied with. We've had some, to your question about how are we going to support students in the classroom, we've had several conversations up here already. I think the poverty weighting is a big one, increasing our ELL weighting and the school finance formula would both be good steps in that direction. And then also continuing to support parents. So one of the things that we did last year in the education budget was we appropriated $500,000 new to support our community colleges that offer English as a learning language to adults at no cost to them. That helps them figure out opportunities for employment, helps them communicate with their children better in English. And also there's a host of other positive outcomes, like you're more likely to be able to participate in the financial system, open a checking account, take out a loan, all that stuff. So that's all really good. Generally, I think it comes down to this question of, again, priorities. Does Iowa want to choose as a state to support a more increasingly diverse population? And I think, if we want to continue to grow as a state, the answer has to be an emphatic yes.
Go ahead.
Rachel, can you explain a little more of what asking for an influx or an investment of dollars? What would that look like? What is some of the programming, or what exactly did you find in the research?
I guess it'll just be addressing inequities in schools, and so our plan is kind of or the district's plan is a good example of that, where you're setting out goals, like a big structure. So the state has ESSA, which is some sort of plan and structure for reducing inequities in schools. But other than the just state compliance stuff, there doesn't seem to be so much of a proactive effort to prioritize equity. And so doing things such as focusing on discipline, so maybe restorative justice programs, or the district just finished a 3-year implicit bias training for teachers. Doing things like increasing stakeholder engagement with parents and students, so maybe funds for that. Changing things like administrative policies, making them more culturally inclusive. So there's various things that the state could get behind or maybe provide guidance on or policies about that would prioritize equity.
Thank you. Could you send all of us a
Oh, yeah, for
copy of
sure.
that or the summary? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, guys.
This is a more general response, but Senator Walz and I, back in December, organized an opportunity for members of our Democratic Senate caucus. We were going to be in Des Moines and invited One Iowa and Safe Schools folks to come and do like Trans 101 and a discussion for our members as we increasingly try and understand the needs and the support for Iowans that are trans, how we can be supportive of them. And it was well attended by our caucus. Last session, we had a bill brought by Republicans that passed to not allow Medicaid payment for certain services to trans Iowans. And we kind of anticipate this session that, kind of the new person or people in Iowa that are going to be maybe under attack are trans Iowans. So we did that kind of in a proactive way with our members to try and just get people comfortable, knowledgeable. Not every member, legislators pay attention to lots of stuff, and we thought it'd be good to take an hour and just let's talk about this and make sure people are comfortable and understand terms and the needs of trans Iowans. And so, there's a lot of ways I think we need to improve people's understanding of what every Iowan needs to be successful.
Yeah. All right, thank you, guys.
Rachel, before you go, one of the things our Democratic caucus in the House has done, we do a weekly meeting to talk about cultural sensitivity and diversity. And we bring in speakers and we have individuals so we can educate ourselves. And one of the things that I think is lacking is the fact that people don't understand what transsexuals deal with on a daily basis and the discrimination that occurs. When I look at the University of Iowa has a map of all the trans bathrooms in the whole campus. Our school district has identified trans restrooms in our high schools so that kids know there's a safe place for them to go. And I think, again, we need to be doing that statewide. And I know you've helped with a lot of those issues. We need your organization to help others and to help just basically make educators aware of the issue because they aren't. And we should never assume that they know what those folks are dealing with on a daily basis because it is tough. And we make it a lot harder when we don't educate ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. We now invite questions from the audience. A reminder that you have 1 minute to pose your question. Legislators, you have 2 minutes, as you know, to respond. In order to maximize the number of questions, you will be timed. You have 1 minute to state your question, so please keep to that. If not, I'll have to prompt you to do so. Please be respectful. As you come forward, please speak directly into the microphone, introduce yourself, and if you're representing an organization, tell us which one. And you may direct your question to any or all of the legislators.
Thank you. Go. Jeffrey Lauer here. I'm the CEO of the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa. I've worked with many of you. Thanks to the League. Thanks to you for being here on a Saturday morning. I am on the MHDS Commission here in Iowa. I've been 30 years with the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa. I have some lived experience of a father of a daughter who survived and thrived through 2 brain tumors, 2 surgeries, and brain radiation. I'm chairperson of our United States Brain Injury Alliance. We've seen an uptick in hard cases. I want to just end with a question about long-term services and supports, but I also need to just preface it by saying climate change. Before anything else, I just want to point out that we haven't heard about it today, and if climate change continues, the needs of vulnerable Iowans are going to be even more hard to address. So on your radar screen, please. I also farm out at the Johnson County Poor Farms, so yay for the farmers who are here. We've got a helmet law, lines law, that's going to be dropped soon by Representative Brown Powers. I hope you can take and support that. It would be for 17 and under for motorcycle and moped use. We have workforce issues in Iowa with direct service around Medicaid and home and community-based services. We have a managed care system that has put the profits of private businesses ahead of the needs of people with brain injury and their families. The long and the short of it is, my question to you is, as we try to accommodate and adjust to the needs of people in Iowa who have a requirement for long-term services and supports, how will you and how do you intend to try to make this system of Medicaid less worse so that people have accessible, accountable, available, affordable services that can help them avoid institutional placement and live well with their disabilities? Thank you.
Thank you.
Climate change is bad. We've got to do more on renewable energy. Caroline Found is a friend of mine. I support Lyons Law. And on the long-term services, we need a carve-out from the privatization scheme. No doubt about it.
Carve-out for?
For long-term care, no doubt. Iowa's privatization of Medicaid was highly unusual in that most states that have done Medicaid privatization have carved out certain populations. Iowa didn't, and that's driving a lot of the problems that we're seeing in the system with a lot of the I think, unexpected, really, really high cost and growth that we're
Will
seeing
you be proposing
Medicaid
that in
spending.
legislation?
I'm not on that committee.
Yes.
Senator Bolcom, I know that's something that Democrats have proposed this in the
Yes.
past. It hasn't gone anywhere.
Thank you.
I think couple things. I was disappointed that the governor spoke for nearly an hour in her condition of the state and didn't mention climate change as an issue facing Iowa agriculture or any of us. That was a disappointment. Clearly, it's an issue. Good news, though, the governor made a really good hire and a new DHS director, Kelly Garcia. She's got her hands full right now dealing with the mess down in Glenwood and Woodward. The U.S. Department of Justice is there. But she's going to be in Iowa City next week to meet with providers at our talk about the Access Center, talk about adult mental health, visit some providers. I think as she gets more knowledgeable about this issue, we could use her help around the issue of a carve-out for people with LTSS in that LTSS population, people that need long-term care. The governor is the decider on this. She's been unwilling to take a look at this. I hope that her new director, we've spent some time with, is really sharp. I hope I don't have to go back on this at some point. But maybe we can get some help from her to see the value of moving in a different direction with this population.
Thank you, Senator Bolcom.
As someone who's ridden motorcycles for almost 50 years, oh, God, I just feel so old when I said that. At 50 years, I do strongly believe that our under 18 should be wearing helmets.
I've actually introduced legislation twice now, trying to get 18 and under kids to be required to wear helmets. It has not gone anywhere in the Senate. It has never been called up to be even discussed. I talked to many of my fellow legislators, and have given them stories of sitting there holding someone in a ditch as they are seriously injured, and some of those people do not live. I've had friends of mine who's had kids that have been seriously injured and have lost their lives, and if they would have been wearing a helmet, especially when they're learning to operate these machines, it would have been a much better outcome.
There was a great group of high school students from this area that came last year and lobbied. I hope we see them again this year.
I hope we do too.
Yeah. Maybe we can move on. We've got a lot of people in line
The
asking
only
questions.
thing I would say, I'm the radical among the group. I believe everybody should be wearing helmets, Jeff, so there you go. I don't mind saying it, and I'll say it publicly, and I've said it to a bait.
Thank you.
So there you go.
One quick question. Representative Kaufmann, you've got a House File 2108. I'd like to visit with you later this week about it regarding daily rates for supported community living that impact people with long-term services and supports. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
My name is Bob Welsh. I'm a member of the Older Highlands Legislature. My question is, what will the state of Iowa do this year, to improve the quality of life for older Iowans? Let me give you 4 areas real fast. Elder abuse. Probably we talk about pet abuse. That's a hot topic. Elder abuse. Most elder abuse complaints are not even investigated because of the narrow definitions in the state law. A person like myself feels that Iowa needs an elder abuse law that protects all persons 60 years and older from all abusers, from all types of abuse in all settings. Joe, I know you've introduced a bill about a study group. We don't need any more studies groups. I've been a part of 3 study groups over the years, and nothing has been done. Another area.
We really, can we stop with that and allow people to answer? There's a long line of people behind you, so, yeah. Just answering that question generally,
well,
abuse
the
and
Republicans,
beyond.
the trifecta is fully ensconced here. The Republicans have been controlled 3 years. This is their 4th year. These are not new issues. We need people to run bills and do something about it. The OIL bills are getting introduced again, the priorities. There's a desire to get Republicans on those bills because that's kind of how things work. If Democrats introduce them, they're dead. If Republicans introduce them, there might be a chance. I don't know that we've got any Republican co-sponsors or sponsors of any of the OIL stuff. So that's a start, but we still have the issue of nursing homes where we're phoning in inspections. Somebody's in trouble in a nursing home, and we don't have the staff to actually go and make a physical inspection. And Governor Reynolds, this has been going on 2 years, 3 years, so that's just, times have changed. That's the new modern way we inspect nursing homes. We do it over the phone now. It's like, really?
Yeah, the whole shortage of healthcare workers.
And the privatization of the ombudsman
And
that's been
Future Ready
proposed.
Iowa doesn't even touch it.
Yeah. So we've got to have the majority party take an interest in the well-being of seniors in our state as we continue to age, and we haven't seen it.
Encourage you to work across the aisles.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yes, next.
I'm Tessa Herron. I work with Rachel at the Public Policy Center. I just wanted to say, I think the question kind of got befuddled or something, but I think essentially what Rachel's getting at is that the programming changes that we've made at the school district have been under the institutional leadership came first. So the school district really put themselves out there as saying, like, we're allies. This is our vision. This is our identity. We believe in diversity. But anyway, so I just wanted to say that I think it kind of got lost. But my question is about the virtual learning that the school is pushing. I think we've already talked today a lot about at-risk students and the social and emotional school belonging connection that's so essential and part of the education system that's not part of the teacher's job description, that is not something that's easily quantifiable. And I'm wondering what you think about this kind of virtual learning, what the scope of it could be, what benefits it has besides saving money, and yeah, just any comments about where you see that going.
Well, last year, we didn't fund Iowa Learning Online. There's a, $500,000 appropriation that was zeroed out last year. I think that you're seeing the Des Moines area public schools have a virtual learning program that they're using to offer classes online. I think the AEAs would be interested in taking kind of ownership of that. I don't know if it's going to go anywhere. Your point about social and emotional learning is very well made. You can't teach that online, that you need that in person. I represent several rural school districts, all of which are really struggling to offer some classes. There are some things where you can probably learn online a little bit easier than others. Probably pretty hard to take physical education online. But I think that there are certainly, if you want to learn Chinese, it's gonna be hard to get a Chinese teacher out to Bennett, Iowa. It just is. So I think virtual learning will continue to grow in importance, especially as we see some of these changes happening. But it cannot be a substitute for adequate funding of our school districts and making sure that we've got trained teachers who are in the classroom and supporting kids.
Tessa, I'm supportive of virtual learning and learning online for certain classes. I don't believe it's the solution for K-12. I think kindergartners online is ridiculous. And it's embarrassing to think that we would support that as a state when we know screen time for that age of kid isn't the best anyway. And so I look at some of the things that we've allowed, those programs that we had for the K-12 learning online, Clayton Ridge and CAM, 40% dropout rates, 60% dropout rates. Now, if that was a K-12 school district, and guess what, Tessa, they keep the money. So even though a kid drops out, they might drop out after a month, the district gets to keep the money the whole year. And those online, out-of-state learning companies are pocketing that dollar. So you tell me how successful that is. I just think it's ridiculous. Obviously, we can't offer all of the offerings to high school students across the state, so we do foreign language programs. We have a number of those that make sense, but not for kindergartners. I don't know how you do PE online, do you? Tell me, because I don't get it.
Yeah, I was just wondering if it's kind of a pilot that people are envisioning growing, I guess, but it seems
We've
like
seen
it's
it growing.
Mhm.
Thanks,
Okay, well,
Tessa.
thanks.
Thank you. Our time is running short. Maybe we have time for a
I think
couple
audience
of
questions are more important than closing statements.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I wasn't even going to give you a closing
Good,
statement.
good.
We'll try to limit our comments,
yes, but
Eliza,
yes,
so
we'll-
maybe one of us just answers,
Yeah, why
okay?
don't we do
That
that?
was Zach's closing statement.
Hi, my name is Ann Bendixson. I just want to point out that I was a Kirkwood adjunct for 13 years, and it was the sole source of income for my family of 3. And during that time, I was not able to get unemployment during the summers, yet school bus drivers could. Okay, but that's not my question. My question is this: why don't Republicans like public schools?
It's a ridiculous question. I'm not even going to give any credence to. That's an absurd question. Of course we do. Of course I do, and I've given you the testimony that shows alternatively. You're going to get nowhere in K-12 public education asking questions like that. That's my answer.
Hi there, my name's Susan Villata. I live in Swisher. Youth vaping is an epidemic. 2 things that work to prevent youth initiation of tobacco products and help users quit are strong public policies restricting the use, and then higher taxes, of course. So while there's a bill to include electronic smoking devices in the Smoke-Free Air Act so that you can't use them in all the same places you can't smoke, which I do hope you all support. I was just made aware of a bill that Representative Steve Holt is working on to treat vaping products like the tobacco products they are and be taxed the same. Currently, they're not. Wondering if any of you would co-sponsor that bill to tax electronic cigarettes like other tobacco products.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
Hello, my name's Randy Milam. First, I'd just like to try to unpack a little bit of what was said today. One thing that was said was that the schools, tax money for the schools, sometimes goes for infrastructure, building new buildings, and that sort of thing. That's a local issue. And if a school district decides to build a swimming pool for their school rather than hire more teachers, that's a local issue. That has nothing to do with state money. Second of all, Ms. Masher had said that education tax money goes to property tax. Well, we also have a local county tax. Our local county tax, part of that, a great deal of that, also goes to education. So if the state gives property owners, like myself, a lot of us my age on fixed incomes, a little bit of tax money back for the tax money that we pay on the local tax, then I see nothing wrong with helping people, especially homeowners primarily that are older folks like me, and on fixed incomes. Okay. So if we get a little bit of money back, when we're still paying more taxes on education on a local level anyway, That's a good thing.
I think that's the
Second,
question.
well, I'll get to my
Actually,
question in a
we need
second.
to, could you say your question? That's your question?
I'll get to my question in a second.
No, let's have your question right now, because you've got people behind you. So could we have your question, please?
Well, I have 2 minutes, right?
No, you
No, you
have
don't.
1 minute.
1
It's already
minute.
expired.
1 minute, and it
Well,
expired
okay.
30 seconds ago.
Okay, my question is, I've also heard it thrown out that taxes was primarily for the rich. That's blatantly false. It's mostly for small businesses. They're not rich. Can our legislators be a little bit less divisive in this era of divisiveness and get a little bit more done and work together rather than throw out all these phony talking points to divide Iowans more than this nation's already divided?
You just asked us to be less divisive, and then you just said that we're all throwing out talking points.
Well, when you say something like taxes is just for the rich, that's a talking point, because it's not true.
Low-income people in Iowa pay a higher share of their income as taxes than the wealthy do. That's our point.
Randy, to answer your question, I think that a lot of us up here in Iowa do things a lot better than Washington, D.C., and we actually do work together, and I'm pretty proud of that, so thank you for asking that question.
Appreciate it.
Okay, I think this will have to be the last question.
My name's Andrew Bartholomew, and my question is specifically for Representative Masher.
Wait? Okay.
Sorry,
Wait,
go
so-
ahead.
Go ahead, sorry. No, you're fine, you're fine, go ahead.
Start over if you would.
Start over, it's okay.
Okay, just for Representative Masher, we see occupational licensing burdens disproportionately affecting low-income people and particularly people of color, especially in areas like Iowa City. Would you be supportive of reform on unnecessary occupational licensing, especially when we look at such as barbers, who are one of the worst state for barbers? They have to pay $20,000 in education just to earn the right to perform a job that only pays $27,000.
Absolutely, and I've been a champion trying to get the barbers and cosmetologists together to try to reform some of their requirements. We also look at plumbers and electricians and some of the things that we've done to make it more difficult for people who have been in prison to be able to take those jobs. And so we're working on that as well. The governor had 4 proposals. We're looking at those all very seriously. I think they'll come through state government, and absolutely, I am very supportive of looking at those and making changes.
Excellent, thank you very much.
You're welcome. We will stay as long as we need to let everybody, I know you may have to wrap up.
I have to wrap, but we can have you go, I think we have another minute.
Let's go.
So, yes, go.
Nancy Porter, known by several and appreciating every one of you. Thanks for being here. Today, I'm Grandma. Grandma of grandson David, who came all the way from Madison, Wisconsin, from his job to door knock today. So we'll do that this afternoon. Grandma of a granddaughter in college, wanting to be a music teacher, who came to Iowa looking at several colleges. And of course, as grandma, I wanted her to go to school here. It happened to be the year that the legislature voted to get rid of our collective bargaining. I admire what's happened here in Iowa City. We have leadership in the union, the ICEA, that works with our administration, and it's working, but generally not across the state. Well, her mother, my daughter, decided this was not the state that my granddaughter needed a certificate for, because if she did get a job, what was she going to get out of it? Not a guaranteed pension, not a guaranteed right to discuss what was going on in the classroom. Anyway, she's back in New York, and she's happy, and she will be a music teacher. But
Nancy, do you have a question?
Yeah, the question is.
Upon my graduation from college, I was very active in the education program. I tutored disadvantaged students for my last 5 semesters in college. Every summer I worked as a camp counselor. I was looking to be a teacher. But upon graduation, I was given a pretty stark option where I could work in healthcare because I took one statistical coding class and make 50% more than what I would make as a teacher. So the job market is telling me I am too valuable to be an educator. So my question to you is, do you agree with that? And if not, how would you change that?
We need to, I mean, we need to fund the schools and make teaching a profession where people can make a good living, have good benefits and good workplace environment. I don't know why people think that in every other field, money determines stuff, but in public education somehow we can lowball everybody and get quality people. So it's about making sure these are good jobs, good benefits, good work environment.
I run into this question from my own daughter, who's a social worker in Chicago. She goes, why don't people value social workers? Why don't we value teachers? I do think we should support these types of people that are going into these fields. And I'm glad you're here bringing this up.
I guess follow-up question, would you do anything specific so that people like me in the future might choose to go into education as opposed to fields that the job market has determined to be more?
What was the other job?
I work in healthcare IT, and I make, just for reference to make sure you know I'm not like some CEO or something, I make between $50,000 and $60,000.
Yeah, I don't think it's the government's job to say, hey, health care IT workers, you shouldn't make $50,000 to $60,000. I don't think it's the government's job, right? We have a free market in this economy. However, there's no doubt that the starting salary for a teacher being $35,000 a year, I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
It's not competitive.
So look, we've had a long, spirited debate up here about school funding. You've heard the perspectives on it. But, we should, but you've also illustrated the point that was made earlier, so thank you.
Thank you for being here. We all think Nancy's great.
I do too.
Deservedly so. I will just repeat what I've said. I believe that the priorities of a state are reflected by the checks they write. The check that the state of Iowa writes, the biggest one too, 40% of the budget, is to K through 12 public education.
So David, lowering class sizes, making sure teachers have the supports in the classroom to meet the needs of their students, more services for behavioral and mental health in the schools, making sure that we have early childhood for all.
Yeah, I appreciate that too, because I know a lot of teachers in my family, and I can tell you their job is much harder than my job.
Oh, and restoring collective bargaining.
But now, it was mentioned that we invest 40-some%. We used to invest 62%. So that tells you got a great first name. Thanks for being here.
All right. Okay. Well, thanks to all of you, those with questions and those with responses, for a very informative session. Thanks to all of our co-sponsors, Iowa City School District, Iowa City Education Association, American Association of University Professors, University of Iowa Public Policy Center Social and Educational Research Program, and to the local television staff for filming this event and live streaming it on the League's Facebook page. Rebroadcasts of this forum will be run on Iowa City Channel 4, Coral Vision, and North Liberty TV. See their respective websites for programming. We also appreciate the use of the Iowa City Council Chamber, Horvath Hall. Our next forum will be February 22nd from 9:30 to 11:30 a.m. at Coralville City Hall. The focus will be environmental issues. Please join us. Thank you very much.